don't just come there as support, right?
Hmm.
Come there as the expert and,
Yes.
give some insights on what you're seeing or even challenge the assumption of what's
Yeah.
being said.
Welcome to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc., where we feature experts in growth and brand visibility for law firms and architecture, engineering, and construction firms. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Calcote King. I'm your host, and I'm the principal and president of Reputation Inc. We're a public relations and thought leadership marketing agency for B2B professional services firms, including architecture, engineering, and construction firms. To learn more, go to rep-inc, that's inc with a K.com. So I'm thrilled to be joined today by Michelle Galindez, who brings over 2 decades of expertise marketing architecture, engineering, and construction firms. She serves as the Director of Marketing and Communications at Syska Hennessy Group, an engineering firm specializing in mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services. So, Michelle's described an interesting challenge that we're going to talk about today in the industry that we're going to explore, which is this misconception that really anyone can do marketing and how it sort of creates obstacles for marketing professionals trying to establish their expertise in technically dominated fields. So we're going to dig into that. But first, let's welcome Michelle. Michelle, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into AEC.
Sure, thank you. Again, my name is Michelle Galindez. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications at Syska Hennessy, and I have been at the firm for just about 7.5 years and really run the function of all of our marketing strategies, our communication strategies, and even have delved into product marketing with our team here.
Oh,
We
great.
are a global firm, and we have 20 offices in the US and 2 internationally, and we're about to open a third one, which is pretty exciting.
Oh, wow. That is exciting. So let's talk about this misconception that anyone can do marketing, because there is this low barrier to entry. We don't have a certification, and let's talk about how it can impact our work and the effectiveness and the morale of the firm's marketers. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So, there's this misconception that anyone can do marketing. And I think what we experience in AEC marketing is that a lot of people work on strictly proposals and they do a lot of styling and they call that marketing. But these same employees, these same professionals are expected to also think about things like website design or rolling out a new service or helping to open up a new office. And at times, there is this misconception that the marketer in house is not the expert, that we have to
Mm,
rely on the technical expert not only for the engineering, but also for the idea of how to open this office, how to sell this project. And so, what we find is sometimes that the voice is limited, right? And you
mm.
don't get enough of a chance to speak up and be a strategic partner.
Yeah, I agree. I see that challenge so much with our clients. And tell me a little bit about how you've navigated that throughout your career, because obviously you've had a very successful career. You've been in this industry for many years. How have you navigated it and worked around that?
So when I first started in the industry, truth be told, I did not know anything about mechanical, electrical, plumbing,
Yeah.
engineering, and I had technical people tell me that. So one of the things that I found really helpful was to get on site, and
Yeah.
so I worked with our employees at the firm at the time that I was at, and was able to look inside of a building behind the walls and see what a chiller looked like and
Mm.
look at a generator for the first time and ride in a scary construction elevator when the building didn't have walls yet. I was also really guided by some principals who thought it was important to kind of be around their junior engineers and kind of learn the
Mm.
lingo. And so, like very early in my career, I took a train class, and I remember everyone in the class was mechanical, and I was sitting there, and they were like, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "They want me to learn this product." And so, it's a technical product, which for most, even if you go to school for marketing or you don't, you really don't have exposure to technical products the way you do
Yeah.
some other industries. And so
Hmm.
the only way to really understand it is to get yourself out there.
Yeah, it's an interesting field in that when you are a marketer of any service or product, you have to become an expert at that service or product that you are marketing. So you have to be both an expert at marketing, but then you also have to be an expert at what you are marketing. You have to really understand it deeply. I mean, not to the level of the experts that you are, the subject matter experts, but you really have to understand it at a depth that is substantial enough to talk about it and to understand it, to be able to market it effectively. I know that you also talked about finding a voice in the room, and because not only your job is to be externally facing, but part of our job as marketers is to work internally and to have a voice internally and to navigate those conversations with those internal subject matter experts. So tell me a little bit
Absolutely.
about how you have done that in practice, and how you've kind of found your voice with those technical experts.
So it's a really great question again. And I think that for marketers to find their voice in the room, it means kind of showing up as the expert, right? I really liked when you said, we have to understand the technical piece of it, but we
Hmm.
don't have to be the engineer, right?
Right.
Or the architect or whatever you are.
Hmm.
But I think the idea of showing up and finding your voice means don't just come there as support, right? Come
Hmm.
there as the expert and,
Yes.
give some insights on what you're seeing or even challenge the assumption of what's
Yeah.
being said, right? You
Hmm.
may have a principal who's been there for 20 years and says, let's do it this way. And just offer up a small idea and say, I hear what you're saying, but what if we consider a, B, and C. So
Hmm.
challenge some of the assumptions, around the messaging, ask a question like, what does success look like to the client? Right.
Mm.
So that's a big piece because instead of saying, hey, what do you want me to write?
Yeah.
You become as reactive and supportive. If you say, what would success look like? And they say, you know what, it's aviation client. They're really thinking about budget. They're really thinking about trying to get this done on time, ahead of schedule. So if we can key in on those two things and you can take that and run with it, you're not just, sitting there going, okay, let me listen to him or her and write this up. You're saying, okay, now I'm going to really pitch this and message this in a way that sets my firm apart from others.
I love that you talked about that question that you just asked, because that's a question I often ask clients. When, if you hire us in a year's time, what will success look like to you? Because that, often, I think, knowing the right questions to ask is a skill set. Is
Mhm.
part of the strategy piece, is how to navigate those questions, and is part of that ability to get the right information out of the people that you're working with. So that's a really
Absolutely.
critical piece of advice.
Mhm.
That was a great example. I'd love if you have other examples of where you've kind of successfully up managed maybe a process with a technical staff that maybe led to a better marketing outcome, that kind of helps with collaboration, that kind of thing.
I tell you, we had one recently here at Syska that I think is a good one, and it's probably one that maybe marketers will start seeing more of the future. Our company developed an app recently, which that's not a proposal, and that's unlike anything that a lot of firms do naturally. And what we started offering to our innovation manager was the idea of wireframes matter, how your eye moves matters, color theory when it comes to tech
Ah,
products is the thing.
yeah,
Um, right, it's not just going to be the corporate colors,
yeah.
right? So we ended up really working hand in hand with our innovation manager to basically redo all the wireframes for this
Mhm.
app that was in development. And I think the end product was a real successful product. And very interestingly enough, it was, the app was free. And
Mm,
it's the top app for what it is on the App Store right now. And so
mm.
it did take a village to put it together. We got really smart engineers who helped to do the calculations. We had some junior engineers who are really interested Python and programming, and they helped. But I think the idea that this innovation manager had enough of a sense to think about marketing as, in other industries, you don't put those sneakers on a shelf unless the marketers are like, yeah, this is good to go. And so we kind of treated it the same here,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked out really well in the end.
Love that. So you showed them that marketing is also a science. That marketing can be a science just like engineering can be a science, and I love that because it absolutely
Right.
can be. There's absolutely a science. Absolutely, marketing is an art in many ways, but there's definitely a science that goes behind that, and I love to do that too. I love to show technical people that there's a lot of studies behind what we do.
Yes.
There's research behind what we do,
Mm,
and that's definitely a way to kind of up manage, to show them, hey,
mhm.
there's expertise behind this, that I think a lot of engineers aren't aware of. They think you're kind of the person that makes things pretty, and
Well,
to,
I mean, we've heard that before, right? I
right,
think every
yeah,
marketer make it look pretty, but I think what you just keyed in on is that there's psychology behind why people buy things and
right,
why things resonate, and I think
mm-hmm,
that was sort of like what we were given the ability to finally do and say, you know, hey, if we design it one way, it looks like this. If we design it another way, it could do that. And I think it's just a little bit of a game changer. Don't get me wrong. There's still some engineers who go, they made it look pretty and it's cringy. But, again, our lead at the company really got it. And I think that's what we need to do. I think you got to champion one by one, right? So show
yeah,
up, champion one by one. Try again if it doesn't work, right? We
yeah.
know that everything doesn't always go as planned, and if it does, set the precedent that that's your model to keep working on.
Yeah, it's like software development. You kind of have to iterate. Yeah, you have to kind
Absolutely.
of roll it out, test it. Absolutely.
Right.
So, and kind of as looking at the kind of evolution of AEC marketing, how are you seeing the relationship between marketing and technical teams transform now? Are you seeing a difference from when you first entered the field? Are there any positive shifts happening, or is it the same, or is it different, or is there anything that, like, if someone new is entering the field? Because I often talk to my team and I kind of say, oh, back in the day, is there differences that are encouraging?
I think there's some differences that are encouraging. I do think that we're in a little bit of a better space. I think architects are probably a little bit more ahead than the engineers and contractors too, where people are starting to understand that marketing isn't just proposals anymore,
Yeah,
that it's this whole field where it's responsible for so many different things, right? We're talking about not just proposals, but we're talking about websites and social media campaigns. And like I just mentioned, products and award submissions, and the list goes on and on. I think there was a time where marketing was seen, because it has this administrative piece, as way too administrative. And I
yeah,
think we've turned the tide a little bit. I don't think every firm is quite there yet, but I think again, when we talked about up managing and trying to show the work through execution, right? Just hey, one understanding the product, right? I never have pretended to be an engineer, but it is my responsibility to understand what an underfloor air system is, right? Because then I can market that better. And so I think understanding that audience, understanding the terms that are in the firm, and then asking interesting questions, finding your champions, right? There
yeah,
are technical folks who are more marketing minded than others align with those people. If I have to give one word of advice, do that.
yeah,
I still think about one principal early in my career because he was the one who was like, "We're taking you on site. You need to go to the training class. You need to learn what it is to be to understand what marketing. I mean, to understand what engineer does to do marketing." And I think we're talking about probably 2005 at this point. So 20 years later, I still think about him and go, "Wow, he had such an impact because he had the marketing mind and he understood that we're not just sitting here waiting for an RFP and waiting for to put your next firm profile and resume together. That there's a different mission for marketing."
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. Yeah, the people that really get it, and then when you make inroads with those folks, the others see the success that you have with them, and then you are able to then get them on board because they go, oh,
Mhm.
I see what they're doing over there. I want some of that. Yeah. I
Absolutely.
wholly agree. I call it the coalition of the willing. So
Absolutely. That's a great
100%.
name.
Yeah.
Sounds like a game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's very hard. It's conservative industry. They don't want to be the first to try something. They didn't go into this field to be kind of groundbreaking and progressive. They went into it because their personality types aren't to be creative and different, so it's not that's not their comfort zone. So if you find someone that likes that and you can try some things with them, then that is absolutely a great strategy. So what advice would you give to someone, a marketing director who's trying to shift their firm's perception of marketing from a support function? And I see this often. They're more of a support. They're order takers, and they're not really. They're not at the table making decisions, and they're not that strategic partner. So they want to become more of a strategic partner. Um, how would you guide them to become more of a strategic partner?
Sure. One of the things I did here at Cisco was tried to form more of an agency model, which you
Mm,
see in
yeah,
what you're probably doing, right? Which
yeah,
is not just a team of proposal stylists, but there's different folks doing different things. So, someone who's working on the social media, someone who's working on videography and editing, someone who is a proposal coordinator. So I think, what advice would I give as a marketing director in trying to shift that firm perception? One, strategic thinking,
yeah.
right? Tie what you are doing in your marketing business plan, your communication business plan back to the firm goals, right?
Mm,
Firm goals are going to be we got to secure clients, client retention, market expansion. We're doing really well doing XYZ. Let's move that somewhere else. Profitability, right? I don't think AEC marketers get enough credit for the ROI of their work. Awards have ROI, whether you know that or not.
yeah,
Website has an ROI. Um, all too often, we don't talk about the values of these things and how they impact firms. And so I think it's sort of missed. And I think, again, when you speak the language of your technical leaders and you frame marketing not as this cost center, but as this investment piece to help your firm's ultimate growth, I think that's when you start changing the game and the dialogue of what you are doing. It's not, like you said, reactive and just taking orders. When's the next RFP? Let me work on it. Celebrate those wins visibly in front of people. If your campaign really resonates and helps to bring an RFP or bring on a new employee, again, these are things that we don't necessarily get credit for the ROI, but they are absolutely happening every day in AEC.
yeah. I love that. Yeah. Speak the language that they're speaking. So, and tie what you're doing to their goals. So,
Right.
if they want to grow in a market, how can what you do help them achieve their goals? So, that is excellent advice. I love that you're talking about awards because that's a key service of ours. So,
Mhm.
and I'm a big believer in that. And tying those directly to that. So that's excellent advice. Well, we always love ending these interviews with allowing you to give sort of one final thought or one important lesson for our listeners. So, if you had one that you'd like to give, I'd like to let you give that.
Sure. I think you should start small, right? Don't take on more than you can chew, right? I think a lot of firms have a lot of initiatives happening at the same time, and I think the priorities can be overwhelming to marketers at time. And I think the best way to do it again is really start small. Um, really key in on something you can bring back to the firm and make it work, right? And again, tie it back to the firm's mission, their vision, their goals, their business strategy. I don't think we do that enough, like sit there and go,
Mhm.
okay, what is the organizational plan, right?
Yes.
And what does the business plan look like?
Yes.
That's how the marketing plan comes to be, right? It can't just be like, hey, you have X amount and make do, right? So I think, if I had to do it all again, I would learn the product as early as I can, but I would also really just start speaking the language and really tying in what we do day in and day out to the ultimate strategy of the firm.
I love that. You'd be amazed how many organizations don't have a strategy. So I have asked clients, what has your leadership given you a strategy? And they say, well, no, I don't think they have one. So that's step one, is work for an organization that does a strategic plan every year. So, but yes, get that strategic plan. Work for an organization that does strategic planning every year, shares it with
Mhm.
your marketing team, and then you can ladder up what you're doing to support that strategic plan, because ultimately that's what we're doing, is we're helping our companies grow and make money. So otherwise,
Absolutely.
yeah, we're not adding value. So
Right.
yeah, so well, thank you very much. This has been an excellent conversation. Thank you so much for talking to us. We've been speaking to
Appreciate it.
Michelle Galindez with Syska.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.